Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I have a guest speaker called Mick
Tian.
Tian. So Mick Tian is is the CEO of Gil,
The Director of Operations, Adrian.
the director of operation of Gil, and he's going to be introducing about Gil Gil service in Ireland. Gil is an autism service in Ireland. So good afternoon, Mick.
Good afternoon, Adrian, and thanks for having me. It really is a great privilege. I've listened to your last two podcasts and they've been brilliant.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So it's really important that we raise voice for re we raise voice about guilt to the Irish parent, because I know many Irish parents are worried about where would their children go after they turn 18. So I think introducing guilt is very important, because I think guilt is a very progressive service. So, can you introduce about yourself and your background and your job, please?
No problem, Adrian. So, my name is Mick Tian, as I was saying, and I work in Geel. I'm the Director of Operations. And years ago, so if I go the long way around,
Yeah.
years ago I would have started out working with, as I was telling you earlier, adults with intellectual disabilities, and some of those guys would have had autism, a diagnosis of autism as well. So when I started out working, I was very passionate about supporting people to have meaningful lives and I was working as a job coach at the time. So a lot of that was about supporting people to get jobs and have careers. But while I was doing that, and I really enjoyed it, and we had some great outcomes for people, I really noticed that what really makes people successful at their jobs, obviously they have to be good at their jobs and all those kind of things, but it was almost socializing with their co-workers and getting on with people and kind of having the bit of fun and with their co-workers, and those people were really successful in their jobs. So I then went and did a master's, and I started to look into it a little bit deeper about the whole area of social inclusion and participating in the community. And I would have then worked as a volunteer coordinator on a befriending program which matched volunteers with people with intellectual disabilities or autism, and matched them up so along with similar interests, so they could create that's much the way most of us create friendships these days. If we're interested in the same thing, we have a common ground and something to talk about. So I was very interested in that, and from then on I kind of worked around managing services, and I worked in another place called Walk, where we would have looked at the whole area of providing support services for people in the community, not in a building, so that people then were telling us what their goals and ambitions and dreams and aspirations for life were, and then we started to craft our supports around what they were telling us. So then I came to Geel, and again it's really looking at supporting people that use the service to have a meaningful life, for them to tell us what their goals, ambitions, their dreams for their life are, and what their special interests are, and trying to put the supports in place to help them achieve what they want to achieve. It's not what we think they should achieve as staff or even families. It's putting supports in when they tell us that they want to achieve something. So, for example, if you look at, say, somebody that is looking at developing a dream around their career. When I left school at 18, I thought I was going to be a rock star, but as you can see, that never really happened for me. But you're allowed to pick a dream, work on it, and you might say, "Oh, I've changed my mind. I'm going to try something else," and that's all right. That's just real life. Um, and it's just about putting the sports in place with people to move at the same pace that they're moving at. And that's really so. That's where I am at now, Adrian.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And when you've been at Guild yourself now for a year and a half, I think, is it, Adrian?
Yeah.
And how are you finding it?
So I think Gil is really progressive. So one of the thing I know in Gil is that they do so the way they support the service user, they do more of the personal center support.
Yeah.
That means instead of the staff changing you or the staff telling what you do, what you don't do, you say what you want to do and what you don't want to do. So you know that usually when you're talking about support for autistic children, usually they tend to be more like ABA therapy Like you heard of
Yeah,
ABA?
absolutely. Yeah.
Like, in ABA or any early intervention, or not just early intervention, usually service for school age children in Ireland, they tend to be more like the ABA, or they tend to say what you do, what you don't do, or it's up to the family what they want their children to be and what their children don't want to be. It's more kind of adult input. But when you come to Gil, it's not like that. It's more what you want to do. It's more up to you what you want to do. And one of the good things about Gil is that 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 in Gil they they support they s- they support your any of your dreams. And for example, I like to be an autistic advocate, and that's what Gil are doing. They support me with being an autistic advocate. And one of the good thing is that in Gil they support they support client is more something what the client wants. And one of the good thing is that the staff cannot change them in Gil.
No, absolutely. You're dead right. And it's about, so I'm glad you mentioned things like ABA and stuff. So we would have an autism practice team here in Gale.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that to you earlier, and it might be worth doing a podcast with those guys as well. I think you'd
Yeah.
find it very interesting. But it's about embracing who people are rather than trying to change who they are. So
Yeah.
if somebody, I mean, stimming or something, if someone
Yeah.
stims, there's a reason why they do that. That
Yeah.
makes them it makes them
Yeah.
regulate their behavior.
Yeah.
It's not something that
Yeah.
you want to change for that person
Yeah.
because it's a coping strategy for them.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding these
Yeah.
things and embracing them as
Yeah.
part of who that person is rather
Yeah.
than trying to change it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I fully agree with you
Yeah.
on that. Yeah.
Because like usually when you're in the children's service in Ireland, they because what their goal is they want them to grow independently and try to help them to build up their capacity.
Yeah.
So that's why there may be a lots of difference that is more like there might be some different that are being eliminated so they can because this is what I find out about in the service in Ireland. When you are a child, the adult try to change you as much as they could, and then when you become an adult, 18 or maybe when you finish secondary school, then they try to see where is your level and your needs, and then when you go into the adult service, then they just embrace your difference rather than trying to change you, things like that.
Absolutely. But having said that, the one part that you said there, which is really key for me, is supporting people to build their capacity, but it should be directed by the people that use the service. So,
Yeah.
for example, you said, do you like to be an autism advocate? So it's learning about what's involved in that and building your capacity and supporting you
Yeah.
to build your own capacity
Yeah.
in that area. That's the key part.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they always see where's the level at, and things like that, and also
Yeah. So you could tell me a little bit about yourself so far.
yeah. So I was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3 with pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specific. So, which means I'm kind of somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. I'm not either severe or too high. I'm somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Part of my autism, I have a special interest in Disney characters, costume characters, and fairy tale. And I go to Disneyland like every 2 years once, where I can touch the Disneyland characters, and that's all I like to do in Disneyland. And part of my autism, I have OCD, loads of obsessions. I have I sometimes do have sensory issue. I have anxiety disorders. Sometimes I do get triggered by some things easily, like when I'm being judged because of my age, or because how the society wants me, or if I have to change myself because of what other people say. These are my triggers, and I have lots of obsession, and part of my autism, I have social integration problem, and I'm likely to make friends either with older autistic people or with younger children in my youth age, and I really accept my autism because it's just a difference, and I don't like to change myself just because of how the society wants, how the society expects, because that way it will make my life easier. And this is all about my autism, and also I like my autistic world, things like that. And also tell me about Ingil.
So Gale, so what is Gale essentially? So
Yeah,
yeah, Gale is, I suppose, it started off years ago, and it was a house for people to live who had a diagnosis of autism, and they were supported by staff. But since then, over the years, it's really evolved, and I guess the best way to describe it now, it's got many different models of support
yeah,
that are tailored to what the person's support
yeah,
needs are.
yeah,
So we never want to, as an organization, over support people,
yeah,
but we never want to under support them either. It's about getting those support levels right,
yeah,
which is not always easy. It's a fine balance. So, for example, some of the different models of support we have sort of the more traditional residential house where you might have 3 or 4 people living together with 2 staff there.
yeah,
Support them to enjoy their life and live
yeah,
as independently
yeah,
as they can, and be active in the community,
yeah,
etc. Then we have the team that you're involved in, and we'd have the transition model of support, and we'd have one
yeah,
of those in South Dublin where you are, and then we'd also have one in Kildare and North Dublin,
yeah,
and that's about actively supporting people with their autism
yeah,
to be part of the community, to build their capacity, as we spoke about earlier, to
yeah,
pursue careers, college, whatever it is,
yeah,
be part, integrate into
yeah,
the community, make friends, all of those kind of things.
yeah,
Then we have day supports for guys that would have a diagnosis of autism and maybe need a little bit higher level of support on a day-to-day basis.
yeah,
But again, those guys, it's about establishing what's meaningful to them and what supports they need to move there, and maybe to understand their own autism and how it affects them and
yeah,
how it affects their own
yeah,
stress levels and stuff,
yeah,
and putting in strategies then to maybe
yeah,
to avoid those situations. And then we have a community support outreach team as well, which where guys, uh, some guys even have been homeless and stuff like that. They would have a
yeah,
diagnosis of autism. Some guys maybe just are ready for the next stage to move and live on their own as independently as possible, or maybe the family situation isn't has broken down a little bit. So we put supports in place that we can reduce over time, so people can live as independently as possible within their own communities. So there's lots of different
yeah.
models of support. Now,
It's
sorry, Adrian, go
it
ahead.
really depends on the level, though.
Exactly. And another exciting thing we have coming on, especially for the transition teams, is we're looking now at developing a career opportunities coordinator piece there, where we will be working with people like yourself that kind of, you know,
Yeah,
you've identified what your career is. So it's about making links with employers and putting programs in place so that
yeah,
people can move on and get some
yeah,
paid work and enjoy life to the full, really.
yeah. And I mean, I know usually when you're in the residential home or the day center, they tend to be more for people with severe autism, but outreach service is more for the high functioning.
Yeah, that's right. So it's again, it goes back to that whole thing, Adrian, of getting the right level of support that you
Yeah,
need. So some of those guys maybe that are in day supports or in the residential setting, they still have huge capacity to build themselves as
yeah,
well. They have very much have special interests that they'd like to
yeah,
pursue. So it's the same for everybody. If we're to treat everyone
yeah,
the same and embrace the difference, then it's the
yeah,
same for everyone. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And yeah, and also Yeah, so for me, I'm in the outreach service, and in the outreach service, I'm in the I'm in the Santifor office.
Mm-hmm.
So over there, so usually I'm supported. So I usually come in either once or twice a week, and I usually is so it's usually up to me what I want to be supported with. For example, I would like to be as I mentioned earlier, I would like to be an autistic advocate. So so that's what they're supporting me with,
Mm-hmm.
is to be an autistic advocate. And second thing is they and I'm here just to learn a bit of like basic self-care skills, how to be organized and stuff like that. Or so that's what I'm in the guild transition team
Mm.
at the moment. And I know and and I have my own key worker who is a social care, and I yeah, so that's what all I do in Gale,
Yeah.
and maybe sometimes I come here and I might do, so it's just that what I want to be supported with. For example, one of the good thing is, for example, for me, I don't really like the social skills, because usually when there are such of things as social skills, I feel that there are lots of difference are being eliminated, and it can kind of trigger my emotion. So one of the good thing is that in Guild, if I don't want to learn social skills, then they just leave it.
Mm.
And if I want to work on basic skills like how to care for myself, like how to cook, be organized, or say maybe in a decade I might be living on my own and saving the bank account, something like that. So it's good that I'm in this kind of service, and say whenever I have a problem, I can always come back to the outreach service and look for support. And so that's what and and also in the outreach service, they're supporting me to be an autistic to be an to be an autism advocate, and that's really good. And I was interested about this. So what is the history of Geel? How did Geel came to
Yeah.
Ireland?
Well, can I just say first, I'm glad you mentioned the part about you being an autism advocate, because we spoke together before to some students and Dara as well. Do you remember
Yeah,
in
TUD.
Grange Gorman, yeah, TUD, and you were amazing.
Yeah,
Like I spoke a little bit, I was okay. Dara spoke, he was quite good. You spoke, you were absolutely out of this world. You were amazing.
yeah.
I'm not just saying that. Uh,
Thank you.
it was a lot of the people there. It was by far the most interesting part. So you were, it was really, really inspiring, to be honest with you,
Yeah,
Adrian.
yeah,
Um, so and I'm glad as well. I know I'm going off the topic a little bit. I'm glad you mentioned as well, say Brendan being from a social care background. So
yeah,
a lot of the guys that work on our in Gale are guys and girls, sorry, are obviously from a social care background. But what we really look for when we're interviewing people or recruiting people
yeah,
is that they have the right values. That's more important
yeah,
almost than having a piece of paper that says I did a course for a couple of years.
yeah,
It's having the right values, it's having the right belief systems to
yeah,
believe that people can be all that they want to be, to
yeah,
believe that people deserve uh, to live a meaningful life, to believe in the rights of people with disabilities,
yeah,
or the UN
yeah,
Convention of the Rights of People with
yeah,
Disabilities. All those elements are essential when we're recruiting
yeah,
staff. So that's why we're able to have support services like the one you're talking
yeah,
about. Does that make
yeah.
sense?
That makes
Yeah, yeah.
sense.
So Gael was, sorry to give you the history. I'm not the best person to give you the history of Gael, but apparently, it was set up in North Circle Road many years ago, by a lady. I can't remember the name of it. But she has in Dimphna, I think, and she had gone to Belgium to a town called Geel, spelt without the H,
Yeah.
Geel. And she'd gone there, and there had been an asylum there, I believe. And that's many, many years ago. That's how people with autism were, where they were sent, or indeed people with intellectual disabilities, that it was seen almost as a mental illness, and they were sent there, which is crazy to think about now. But when this lady came back, then she set up a service for just one house for a number of people with autism, and it was a much more, at the time, I suppose, humane approach to supporting people. So it was just a house with a number of residents living there. It was on the North Circular Road, I think, and that was called, then they couldn't think of a name, so they came up with Geel because they didn't have been in Geel, and that's where it originated from. But since then, I know you spoke to Dara last week, and Dara's father Peter was very much a driver in supporting people to have to take the human rights based approach to supporting people with autism. It's not just about, because it started off being all about care and making sure people are all right and never taking a risk, but now it's more about, well, what do people want from their life? They have a right to work, they have a right to socialise, they have a right to all of these things, and what are we doing about that? And that's really what drives us on now.
Yeah. I know that back in the historical time, the treatment of autism weren't as good as today.
No.
Like, I know in Ireland, back back then before the before the 1990s, I remember I heard people saying that autism usually describes someone who would be severely autistic, someone who is high functioning like the Asperger one. They would be just viewed as other normal people, except someone who is very erratic, naughty, or bold with all the judgmental comments. And but it wasn't until today where when we're talking about autism we talk about the whole spectrum. So so until nowadays, the view on autistic people, I mean nowadays, if you're talking about the support, it's kind of getting better, but as I said before, it really depends on which society you live in. Like in some society they have the better understanding and acceptance, while in some society they can be still discriminating and maybe reject the differences because of how the social norm works. I mean, different society have different norms, expectations. Some society, the norms could be getting less and they can be so liberal, like the Dutch or the Japanese. While in some society, they have lots of social norms that you need to follow, and it just depends on where you go. So yeah, I mean, looking at Ireland now, I mean, if you're looking at the Irish Society for Autism, they tend to be focused about inclusive society where they try to include people with autism in the society and give them the right support. And that's what is good now about the Irish society. So it's more about being inclusive. Yeah, so
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on that one. But I still think we have more work to do in
yeah,
some cases. So when guys are going to, some of the guys that we support going to college or getting into employment or
yeah,
joining the local badminton club or whatever it is,
yeah,
and maybe it's up to us as a service here to maybe provide that autism
yeah,
awareness to groups like that, because maybe it's not fair to expect everyone to understand, but I do feel that society in general in Ireland is quite open
yeah,
to at least having the discussion or having the
yeah,
conversation, and that's a good thing. That's somewhere that we can start
yeah,
from anyway. And again, I know we said it earlier, but it is far more effective, say, if we are having those conversations around autism awareness or whatever it is. It's far more effective when somebody like you that lives and experiences it on a daily basis gives the presentation. It's just such it's far more inspiring than say someone like me who goes, I'm almost reading off a PowerPoint slide or something. It's just much more real, I suppose. More
Yeah,
so it is great. So
yeah,
I really do believe that,
yeah,
and it shows people that we because there is some people still have blinkered views of what autism is or
yeah,
intellectual disabilities or disabilities in general or difference in general,
yeah,
and it's just changing those mindsets really, which is easy to do.
yeah.
Um, so do you think there are improvements, Adrian, that could be made in Geel?
Well, here's my suggestion.
Yeah.
I think for improvement in Gil, well, first of all, I think it would be good if there is some service like that for teenagers as well. Because here's the thing I notice about teenagers. I know that when you are young, they try to put more of the adult input into the children, so as they grow, they can make their life easier. But the thing is that because like based on my experience, I prefer a service like Gale. Because like in other service where the professional try to change you in a way that you may not like, but they might think, but they're finding the best for you, but it's not really for you. It's not really the best for you. So because like when you're in the children's service, professionals are more worried about because they what they're trying to do is they try to make them to grow and make them to be part of the society, and they may even try to make them so as they get older they can have more capacity and be independent. So what they do is they might try to eliminate some of the difference. For example, they try to make the autistic person not to be too weird or strange, or maybe doing a behavior that can look suspicious to other people. So as they go into the society, they can live independently. But like for autistic people, this can be a bit of damaging because of how their worlds work. And if things don't work in their world's way, there can be a lot of damage going on. Because like in general sense, it should be the society who change for autistic people, not really the autistic people who needs to change. It's more of the society who needs to change. So because in Guild, one of the things they do is that they don't really change the person. They support the person. And if something the person don't want to change, then they just let it be. And if they want, so it really depends on the person. So what I can say is that it would be good if Gil can also provide service for teenagers as well. But unfortunate because like here's the thing I see it. Because like basically when you are a teenager, you're starting to have the mind like the adult.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you turn 15 or 16. So I think you're well enough to be in the service like Gil. Because I think service like Lucina or the ABA, I think it might be more work in younger children, but if you work on a teenager, that can be impossible because, like, in true sense, because from my belief, teenager does have the mind of the adult, and they they do have the body nearly like the adult, but it's just that they're still developing. Like even me, I'm 19 this year, but I'm still developing. And most people wouldn't stop developing until the age of 25. But what I can say is that it would be good if Gil can also provide service for teenagers with all the outreach service and things like that.
Yeah, I agree, Adrian.
Yeah,
And that was something we discussed recently in Gale. And as you know, and I think we might have chatted before, there's a huge amount of people. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but there are a lot of people, and we would see it through some of the guys that get referred to Gale, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But who would have been in secondary school
yeah,
maybe at around the age of 15, 16, the age you're talking about,
yeah,
they started to, it just gets overwhelming for them because the education system is one way
yeah,
and it doesn't accommodate somebody
yeah,
with
yeah,
autistic people.
yeah,
Um, and they just disengage. And until they hit 18, there's nothing for them because Gail can't start working with someone until they're 18. So it is something that we were definitely looking at and we were looking
yeah,
at trying to do. So a couple of us did. Because when you're working with people, this is kind of boring, but when you're working with people that are under 18, you have to do children first training and you have to have certain protocols in
yeah,
place and stuff like you just have to, legally speaking. So we've done those training.
yeah,
And I know I worked in a previous organization where they started engaging with people
yeah,
around careers and employment and education at age 16
yeah,
and just started getting, because a lot of kids when they're 16 get their first job, just with a
yeah,
pocket money to buy whatever they like.
yeah,
And it just gives you, but it gives you a whole experience of work
yeah,
and the world of work and
yeah,
earning money and spending money. And then it starts to give people a thought of, oh, maybe I'd like to do this more. I'd like to go to college. So instead of going to a
yeah,
traditional support service, they start thinking about, okay, I need support to go to college now, or I need
yeah,
support to get a job, or I
yeah,
need support, so they can
yeah,
start.
yeah,
So I agree with you. Yeah,
yeah.
it's something that should be done.
I mean, when you reach to the age of 16, you do have some of the you you nearly kind of like have the right like the adult, except when you sign for some of the consents, their parent need to sign it with them. Like for example, I know that for 16 years old, they they can I know that they can leave school, they can get a they can seek for a job earlier, they can go into the community college or like the PLC course. I know 16 years old can I know it's the age of consent and it's the age where they and say for example when they work in the voluntary job they need to be Garda vetted. So when you turn 16 you're nearly so actually you do kind of have the right like the adult, except you need your parent to consent it with you. Then when you turn 18 then you consent it by yourself. I get what you mean like with the school, because like when you're in school they cannot there is some kind of school norm that they have to follow, like wearing uniform or following some of the rules even though they don't like, but they have to follow it. Because like especially when you're in the mainstream school, because when you're in the mainstream school they cannot really use autism as an excuse to let them not follow the rules or the school norms. Unless you're in special school, that would be a different case. But it would be good if we look into ways where we can support the autistic people, autistic teenager at the age of 15, and maybe we can let 15, 16 or 17 years old come into Gale and to get started. I think that's really good. Because like when they turn 15 or 16, I think I think if you treat them like adult, I think they are ready for it. It's just that they're still developing. But I mean lots of their development have developed already since they were a child. So I think that's really makes sense. So it would be good if, for my suggestion, if Gil can also take in autistic teenagers as well, like when they turn 12, 13 or 14 as well, and maybe get them started, something like that. And here's the question I will ask. Say for parents who want their children to coming into Gil
Yeah.
when they turn 18, what is your advice for the Irish parent?
Well, Now, you have to take into account that I will be biased about Gil, but what I would say to parents consider, so when parents are, when their son or daughter are about to leave school and they're considering
Yeah,
the next steps, there's lots of, it can be very confusing.
yeah,
There's lots of different types of support services out
yeah,
there. Sometimes, depending on where they're located, sometimes they have to go looking for them. Sometimes maybe their school might have invited different services in to talk about them and they get a chance to talk. But I would say to everyone is to go and check out all the different support services because their son or daughter and them will know what's the best fit for them. So I can say Gail is fantastic and we do this, that and the other, but it might not suit some people. I think it suits you, Adrian, and I think it
yeah,
does suit a lot of people. But for other people, they have different priorities, and that's fine. It should be a buyer's market, if you like. It should be the person that's going to be receiving the service should be choosing exactly what the way they want it. So I would first of all, my first piece of advice would be to do your homework and find out what the different support services are. If people want to ever look at, say, what we call them referrals. So when someone new comes in, they're called referrals. There's on the Gale website,
yeah,
www.gale.ie, there is a referral section that you can see the process that's involved.
yeah,
So basically, what will happen is every parent, and it doesn't happen just be for people leaving school, it can be for older people as well. They need to contact their local HSC disability manager. Um, and that depends on where you're living. So if you're living in South Dublin, it'll be someone different than if you're living in North
yeah,
Dublin. And then they will contact Gail on their behalf. They'll say, McTean wants to come to Gail, he wants to receive a support service. Can you meet with the family and meet with McTean and see what it is that will be the best type of service? And we would do that, and then we would link in with the HSC. And that's generally speaking how it works. So it's done in conjunction with the HSC
yeah,
at the moment.
yeah. I know that with Gil, many parents, many you see, because I know that in Gil, not everyone know about Gil.
Hmm.
So, what would be your suggestion? How can we, how can we spread the message about the Gil service?
That's a very good question, Adrian. And that is something we were talking about before. And you're right, it's not that well known. Even in our local areas where we have support services, it's not that well known.
Yeah,
Um, and in some ways, that's a nice thing because you don't want to be saying, "Oh, here's the autism service. Look at this." But at the same time, it is good to have the name out there to show autism in a positive light, and
yeah,
that's really where we want to get to. So I would see it looking at linking in with colleges, employers, and all those things, and
yeah,
selling ourselves as experts in the
yeah,
area of supporting people with
yeah,
autism. I would see it. Uh, I'd like to. We have a community engagement fund now that we're setting up for people
yeah,
that we support to kind of dip into, and using it there for people. And say someone links in with a local gym or a local tennis club, whatever, and we might do an autism awareness piece. So it's build. I'd rather that we build our name up within the local communities
yeah,
where we're present.
yeah,
Really, that's the first thing. Uh, in terms of building a kind of more nationwide brand, look, that will happen eventually. But I'd rather that we celebrate the good stories and the good
yeah,
stories that we have and that it builds up that way,
yeah,
and then through word of mouth and just because we do have a good reputation amongst the people that do know
yeah,
us, but it's just not that many people know about us, as you say.
yeah,
But then you have social media, things like your podcast
yeah,
that will bring in
yeah,
extra people. So it's all those good
yeah,
stories that hopefully will do it.
yeah. So, yes, that's a very good advice. And and say for example, if the parents have their autistic children who just turned 18 and they need to find service like you, and they are just finishing their leaving cert, or maybe for those who are in special school they just finished school, and the parents say they need to find service for their children who turn 18, what will your advice be?
Well, I would talk to the teachers in the school and they will. So each school is different,
yeah,
Adrian. Like some schools will have a designated person, like it's different. It's different schools, like a transition coordinator. They're called sometimes.
yeah,
That will look at moving someone on to the next
yeah,
step. And if that doesn't exist, then it's linking in with the HSC disability manager. But if anyone ever wants to find out about Geel, we have a referrals email address. It's referrals
yeah,
at geel.ie, and they can just email in, and we'll answer any queries
yeah,
for them. And that's really all I could suggest.
yeah, yeah. And I know they do need to give them like the psychologist diagnosis letter.
Yeah, there's certain things that we look for, like all those kind of things. Yeah, but really, it's about meeting the person and seeing what kind of support they would like and what they want to
Yeah,
do. And we'll
yeah,
try and then see does it fit in for them. Ultimately, it'd be
yeah,
great if they were to make the decision that this is the place for me, or no, I think I prefer something else. It's up to, you know what I mean.
yeah. So so now it's time to wrap up, but it was nice to meet you.
Thank you, Adrian. I really enjoyed it
Yeah,
as always. Yeah.
yeah, and it's really important that we raise voice for the Irish parent, as I know many Irish parents do get worried about where do their children go after they turn the age of 18. So I think introducing Gil for them would be a best way to do. So so for my next podcast, I'm going to invite my guest, Colin Harty. Colin Harty is one of the staff in Gale. He is the current location manager of the Southside Transition team, and we're going to be talking about what it's like being a Gale staff in art in Gale. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. Pleasure.
Yeah.